In this video, we will be tracking the online users in our application. In order to do that, I have just set up some basic layout for the dashboard. So here we can see that we have got a list of users that I've created already. So I'm using devise gem to create the user accounts. We want to show a last seen timestamp for that user, and on the right side of the page then we have an online users section. So that will be users that are online right now. And before we get into it, I want to give a shout out to Scout APM for sponsoring this video. Scout APM makes it easy to track down bugs in your application and eliminate performance issues. Check out the link in the description below for a 14-day free trial. So let's have a look at the code that we have set up for our application. So I've already created some basic layout code and we're iterating over our user list. So this is all the users in our application. So we'll want to add a time for when that last user was seen, for when each user was seen. And then on the bottom of this page is the right column where we will be showing the online users at that point in time. So let's begin by adding a new field to our database table. So we'll create a new migration. We'll add a last seen at column. So this will be a date time column to record the last time that we have seen that user signed in. So now let's open up this migration. And that looks fine. It's a column name, it's a date time. So let's run the migration. So Rails db migrate to run that migration. So now let's open up our schema file, and you'll see that we just have this users table. This is our device table. So we're recording the email address, and we've added a new field for the last seen at. So let's go to our application controller now. And in here we want to create a new method, and this will be for updating the last seen at time. This will update that column in the database. But first, let's output a message to the Rails console. So we'll update the last seen at timestamp for the user, and we can output the user ID here, just for reference. Now we also want to add a before action here. This is to trigger our method. And we will add a conditional statement onto this. So we'll say if, and then we'll pass the logic into this block. So in here we want to check that the user is actually signed in. So we only want to record the timestamp if they are signed into the app. So if they're signed in, and then we'll have two different conditions here. So let's use brackets just to make that clear. So first we'll say if the user last seen at is nil. The first time they sign in, this will be nil. The second thing we will check for is the last seen at timestamp. So we want it to be more than 5 minutes ago. We don't want to run this update method every time the page is loaded. So that would be overkill, but in our condition we want to ensure that it runs after 5 minutes. So then within our update method, let's go ahead and update that timestamp. So we'll say current user.update attribute. We're only going to be updating one column here. So we will pass in the current time. So let's have a look at our Rails console. And here you can see on the console now that it is not updating the timestamp. and that is because we are not signed in currently. So let's sign into one of these accounts to test this out. And we have an issue here. I think we've got a typo for the user. So we said user.lastcnat. So this should be current user. So let's update this. So let's give this another try. So now once we try again, we are seeing that the update is happening on each page load. So something's not quite right here. So we only want to be loading this once every 5 minutes. So the timestamp should only be updated once every 5 minutes. Let's have a look at our logic again to make sure that we have things right. So let's change the greater than to a less than symbol and try it once again. And you can see now that it is only called once and it doesn't get called on the page reload. So let's have a look at what is actually happening here. So this current user.lastcnat is less than 5 minutes ago. So we're comparing two different timestamps here. So the earliest one will be the less than. So it's a little bit confusing working with two different timestamps sometimes, but when you actually stop and look at it, it becomes a little bit more clear. So the next thing we're going to do is set the online users. So in this case, we're going to use the last CNAT to determine which users are being loaded. So we're going to pass in a value which will be the timestamp in this case. So we'll say 5.minutes ago. So we only want to get users that have been active in the last 5 minutes. So now once we reload the browser, we can see that we have got one online user. So this meets our criteria of active within the last 5 minutes. So let's go back to our view now and we'll add the information on each user when they're last seen. So I'm going to use the helper for this, time ago in words, and then we'll pass in the user.lastcnat timestamp. And since the default value of this field is nil, we have to allow for that. So let's have a condition here to say that we'll only output that time ago in words if the last CNAT has a value. So that works. We can actually modify this to show a different value if the user has not signed in already. We can do that quite easily using a ternary operator. So this would be inline if-else condition. So if they have not signed in, we can just say that they're not signed in or never signed in. But then otherwise we'll show the timestamp for when they actually have signed in last. So to correct this, we should add brackets around the time ago in words, so we don't confuse things. And that's working. So we've got the never signed in for those nil values, and then we've got the timestamp for anyone who has signed in before. So we can modify the timestamp here that we're looking for. We could actually make this 2 minutes or 3 minutes. That's really up to you, but it's just good to have a value here so that we don't do it on every page load. So doing it on every page load would overload our server if we have hundreds of users signed in anytime. So it's probably a good idea to only do that after a few minutes of being signed in. So we only record that once every few minutes. So the next thing I'm going to do is have a count of the users that are online at this moment in time. And since we already have an array of those online users, we can simply count the number of items in that array by using the dot size. I'll add a little bit of style to this using the badge class. So I have dropped in Bootstrap just to make this look a little bit nicer on the front end, but it's really up to you how you style this. So you can see here that we've got one user online at the moment. So let's test this out by signing in with a different account. We'll sign out first. We'll sign in with a different user. And now you can see that we've got two users online. So it's worth noting here that we are no longer signed in as the david@example.com account, but yet it is showing us as online. So we're not checking to see the online status of that user, but we're simply working with timestamps here when they have last been seen. And I think that's accurate enough to show this value. So we can work just from that timestamp value of a few minutes of when that last person was active. And then naturally, as time goes forward, that user will appear offline. So just to make this more obvious, I'll change this to 2 minutes, and we can see that Jane is now the only user online. So that's going to do it for this video. Hopefully you guys have found this helpful, and make sure to subscribe to the channel so you do not miss out on future videos. And I also want to give a shout out to Scout APM for sponsoring this video. Scout APM makes it easy to eliminate bugs and performance issues in your Ruby on Rails application. Check out their link in the description below and get a 14-day free trial. So other than that, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.